Team Hochberg Traffic Center time and Jim.
Inbound Eisenhower Expressway traffic still really snarled from York Road to the Tri-State with a crash on the ramp to southbound 294. Traffic only gets by on the shoulder of that ramp. The delays again start at York Road. It is a 52-minute trip from 390 to downtown Chicago. Just 18 from Wolf. Outbound, you're looking at 30 minutes to 390. In Hodgkins, there's a mess on LaGrange Road south of the Stevenson Expressway. Lanes are blocked southbound. Traffic gets there on the right shoulder. Only gets by on the right shoulder. Northbound, there's congestion as well. On the Stevenson itself, inbound delays start at Cicero. 30 minutes, 390 to downtown. I'm on 31. It's heavy approaching LaGrange. That's traffic. I'm Jim Talamonte on AM 560, The Answer.
Chicago's Morning Answer continues next. In our AM 560 Weather Center, our meteorologist Steve Williams.
We do have a wind advisory this afternoon. Some sun and clouds, and look for a thunderstorm possible this afternoon. High 74. Windy tonight, rain and a thunderstorm, then clearing out late, low 35. Tomorrow, sunny with a high 49. I'm Steve Williams on AM 560, The Answer.
68 at O'Hare. Next news at 8:30. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
Listen to AM 560, The Answer, online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, on TuneIn, iHeart, and radio.com. This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560, The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. Andrew Cuomo over the weekend, America's governor there out of New York, the governor who presided over the worst and most lethal outbreak of COVID in the United States, and nonetheless is treated like the General Patton of COVID by the D.C. press corps. He had this to say about the prospect of a vaccine and any sort of distribution of said vaccine, any sort of execution of a COVID vaccine plan between now and Jan 20.
This administration is now starting to implement the vaccination plan. That's going to be very important, and that's probably the largest test we've had since COVID started. The vaccination plan is a huge undertaking. 330 million people have to be vaccinated. This nation only did 120 million COVID tests in 7 months. If this administration rolls out a flawed vaccination plan, it's going to be a problem because it's going to be very hard for the Biden administration to turn it back. But I think you'll see a different tone now. I think you'll even see some governors start to take a different tone now that Mr. Trump is out of office. I think the political pressure of denying COVID is gone. I think you'll see scientists speak with unmuzzled voice now. And I think the numbers are going to go up and Americans are going to get how serious this is.
Mm-hmm. And the upshot is, he should just hold off and let Joe Biden take the reins on this bad boy, especially with the news this week about Pfizer's intermediate results of 90% efficacy with the vaccine that they have in development.
Right. You think he'd be chomping at the bit to say, this is great news, let's get this vaccine rolled out? Because what President Trump is doing, he's giving vaccines to the governors, and then they can decide the distribution of said vaccine. But instead, he said it was bad news because President Trump's in charge.
For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by Dr. Roger Klein. He is an expert with the Regulatory Transparency Project's FDA and Health Working Group, former director of molecular oncology at the Cleveland Clinic, former advisor to the FDA, CDC, CMS, and HHS. Dr. Roger Klein, thanks for joining us.
Hi, Dan. Hi, Amy.
Hello. So with respect to the Pfizer being on the cusp of potentially a vaccine that they'll submit for FDA approval, how much of that is owed to standing up Operation Warp Speed, do you think?
I think a lot of it is. I mean, I think, first of all, there's a guaranteed purchase of $2 billion. We don't have the contracts. It's not public. They're not publicly available, so we don't know if there's been any transfer of funds or if there's been assistance in, for example, the testing. But I would say there's two components to it. First of all, they had a guaranteed customer for $2 billion with contracts negotiated up front. And secondly, the regulatory framework and the direction toward, or the push for implementation for increasing the speed and efficiency of the clinical trial approval process is a function of Operation Warp Speed. So I think that the HHS and the president deserves a great deal of credit for this.
Yeah, and also Brown University, one of the doctors there said they thought the vaccine effective rate would be 70%, so that it's 90%. That's huge because if the data holds up, it'd be on par with childhood vaccines like measles and chickenpox.
Yeah, I mean, it's early. They've got 44,000 people in the trial. They looked at a small number. I think the 94 people ended up having COVID, most of which, from what we can tell, they haven't released the details. Most of the ones who got it were people who were not vaccinated. So yeah, this is really good news. It's better than. We didn't know what to expect. It looks better than I think, or toward the really good end of what we could have expected or anticipated. And I think it's really a testament to the ingenuity of our industry, and when they're left to or are guided to do their best work. I mean, I think the Trump administration, in my view, I haven't always had people as receptive and letting me say it. I think it's done overall an excellent job in managing this pandemic, and largely that's due to helping allow the private industry and helping facilitate private industry to put their expertise to bear and bring outstanding products to consumers.
Well, after making that statement, Dr. Klein, I regret to inform you the New England Journal of Medicine is going to call for your medical license.
What?
Making the statement that Trump has done an overall good job. That's not the position that's allowed to be spoken, much less actually held. I wanted to get your take on this. This is something that was being circulated, and get an expert opinion on this. So Trump suggested that the Pfizer results were delayed post-election. And remember, Pfizer suggested itself, with no prompting from Trump, that they would know by the end of October whether or not they had a vaccine in the offing. And then it was delayed until the announcement this week, of course. This has been circulating. Initially, the study protocol provided for an interim efficacy look at 32 events, in this case, when 32 subjects across both arms of the study developed infection. The FDA then moved the goalpost to 62 events, which explains the delay. Pfizer had guided to a late October interim efficacy readout based on the initial protocol of 32 events, but then it was pushed off to say, no, 32 won't do. You're going to need 62 events. Do you have any information about that? Does that sound plausible to you, concerning at all?
Well, I think, does it sound plausible? Yeah, of course it's plausible. I mean, it ended up over 90. So so they looked at over 90 patients instead of the 66. What the deliberations were and why they changed their original plan is anybody's guess, and I'm not privy to any particular inside information. These are decisions that people agree on, and there's an arbitrariness to them.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. I wanted to get your take on another study out. We're talking about it a little bit earlier in the program. A study that was done by an open safely cohort of 12 million adults in England, 35 authors of this study, and the result ultimately was this, looking at the transmission of COVID from children to adults. Our results demonstrate no evidence of serious harms from COVID-19 to adults in close contact with children, compared to those living in households without children. This has implications for determining the benefit-harm balance of children attending school in the COVID-19 pandemic, for example. I mean, the upshot is that there's no reason kids shouldn't be in school now and shouldn't have been in school this entire time.
Yeah, I mean, I think these types of studies are helpful in suggesting and providing some data for, I think, what many of us suspect. look, I've never believed that kids aren't going to get it, and I think they can transmit it, and I think we've seen that. But they're not worse at it necessarily. I mean, I don't. It doesn't. The risks of keeping children out of school are, to me, seem far greater than the risks of sending them to school. And I have some personal experience with this with a child who I think had it. It's not entirely easy to tell with this testing situation that we experienced, but which I won't go into. But I think I felt all along that the kids belonged in school, and I think this further confirms that our instincts are right, and kids don't really get sick with this, and they can transmit it, but I don't think they're at any we're not at greater risk from it, and I think we need to move on with.
But have there been documented cases of student to teacher transmission anywhere?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I think there are. I think it would be naive to believe that kids can't transmit it. I mean, they have a viral load. The virus is contagious. It's living in a kid. It's living in the nose or throat of an adult. I mean, so a lot of it has to do with the closeness of the contact and how long that contact is. That's really the primary determinants for spread. So, I think we have more to learn, but I don't think that they pose an inordinate risk is what I would say and what I've said all along. But I think in Israel and along, it might be months already that they had documented evidence of transmission. Teachers can get it, but they can also avoid it through hygienic practices, ventilation, keeping away from people. So I think on balance, doctors go to work.
Yes, nothing is zero risk. Nothing is zero risk, but this is minimal. This is minimal risk. Nothing is zero risk with respect to COVID specifically, but this is minimal risk.
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem with COVID all along has been that most people don't even know they have it, and most people don't get particularly sick with it. And so you have this disease that spreads quite readily, but most people don't know they have it, or and the more the media convinces people that everybody who gets it who survives it is surviving a Ebola, then it further creates that perception in people and makes them not aware that they have it, and of course it's already set up for spread. When you have young children, for example, with young parents, they may not know they have it either.
I wanted to get your reaction to another study because therapeutics are so relevant, particularly here as we're talking about vaccine. Even everything checks out with the Pfizer vaccine in development. You're still talking about maybe into the end of the first quarter of next year before the vaccine is widely distributed. We don't know exactly. This study from the National Institutes of Health reported yesterday on hydroxychloroquine, finding that it had no benefit for hospitalized COVID-19 patients. Looked at hospitalized patients beginning in April at 34 hospitals across the country, enrolled 479 out of 510 patients before preliminary evidence led the monitoring board to recommend stopping the trial. Most patients in both the hydroxychloroquine group and the placebo group were hospitalized and receiving oxygen or invasive mechanical ventilation to maintain their breathing. The upshot is that, again, HCQ had no benefit for hospitalized COVID-19 patients. But I ask about this study in part because of the results. This was published in JAMA. And in part because isn't the promise of hydroxychloroquine prior to hospitalization, hydroxychloroquine a treatment for early intervention? At least that's what we've heard from emergency room docs that we've spoken with.
I think it's the potential is twofold. The first is that it's an anti-inflammatory medicine, so it would prevent, in theory, help prevent the cytokine storm is what they call it, where you have this overactive immune response, and it's not the virus itself, but your own body's immune response that causes what the lung disruption, what they call ARDS, or acute respiratory distress syndrome. And so that would be the theoretical mechanism for its impact on sick people. The other part would be potential role as a direct inhibitor of viral replication, which has been shown in cells, outside the body, but not it's obviously not proved in others. I think hydroxychloroquine has moved back somewhat from consideration, both because of a number of observational studies and some trials that don't prove or haven't yet proved effectiveness, but also because I think we're getting drugs that are more antiviral type drugs that look more promising, quite frankly.
And then the FDA gave emergency okay to Lilly's antibody treatment for COVID-19, and is that what they used on President Trump?
No, I think they used Regeneron's version. It's a similar kind of drug, though. I mean, what they're looking at are these abnormal immune proteins that people make in response to exposure, and it's part of the way we protect ourselves. And what they're doing is they're basically concentrating those types of immune proteins, our body's defenses against invaders, and they concentrate them and then they inject them and they seem to have some effect. They bind what's called the spike protein. That's why it's called the coronavirus. It's got a crown. They bind that spike protein and prevent it from entering cells. And these drugs seem to work. It's the way convalescent plasma would work as well. You're really getting that where you're really trying to infuse those types of immune cells. And I think so we have a couple of choices now, and they seem to potentially have some benefit.
And with respect to the renewed lockdowns in Western Europe and some of the states in this country, including Illinois, with no in establishment dining at restaurants, for example, does that make sense to you with respect to sort of using positivity rates as a trigger, ever-moving positivity threshold rates, that I should add, as a trigger for telling people you have to eat in a tent outside rather than in a restaurant with the door open, for example?
I haven't been a big fan of this personally. I don't really think, trying to micromanage an epidemic in that way hasn't made a lot of sense to me. Because I always kind of look at what's the end game, and so I sort of feel like the better approach is what we want to do is we have two goals, and that's to prevent death, prevent serious consequences from the virus, and I think that, and then to prevent the hospital system or the healthcare system from being overwhelmed. And I think when we start to see those types of things, that would be particularly the hospital, like if the healthcare system starts to get overwhelmed, it could potentially justify some of these more serious measures that we've taken. But in general, we haven't needed that, and you wonder what the end game is. If you want to save people from for now, we have a bad potential vaccine. You want to shut everything down or stop activity for the vaccine. You could say that's a goal, but I suspect half the people or more won't even take it. So I don't really think it makes. I think people have choices, and they can live their life. We're doing a much better job at protecting people because they're protecting themselves.
He is Dr. Roger Klein, expert with the Regulatory Transparency Project's FDA and Health Working Group, former director of molecular oncology at the Cleveland Clinic, and former advisor at FDA, CDC, CMS, and HHS. Dr. Klein, always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
The stories you need to know to start your day. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
If you're drowning in IRS debt and can't afford to pay, then you need to take advantage of special IRS tax programs that are available and free yourself from IRS collection efforts once and for all. Due to the financial hardship consumers are facing throughout the country, the Internal Revenue Service has made it easier to settle delinquent tax problems. An open phone line has been established by Community Tax for consumers to call and see if they qualify. Take down this number or store it in your cell phone, but call the Community Tax Helpline at 800-500-5588. If If you owe back taxes to the IRS and cannot afford to pay them back, or even if you have years of unfiled tax returns, there's no need to fear anymore. But you have to call the Community Tax Helpline today at 800-500-5588 for the help that you need. Don't take on the IRS alone. They can attack your wages, savings, pension, home, and even your Social Security check. Call 800-500-5588 for your free consultation and to see if you qualify. That's 800-500-5588.
Guys, prioritizing your health now is more important than ever, not only to build your immune system, but to address any chronic health issues you may have. I recommend Low T Center. They exclusively specialize in men's wellness and follow strict medical guidelines for your health and safety. They are one of the leading men's medical providers in the country. Low T Center has reinvented the doctor's visit, making it quick and easy to get all of your levels checked, not just your testosterone. It starts with an annual wellness exam where they do a comprehensive health assessment so you know all the numbers important to your health. If you've been feeling tired, grumpy, have noticed weight gain and loss of muscle mass, these could all be signs of low testosterone levels, low thyroid, or even sleep apnea. Low T Center can determine the cause and help. And now they offer monitored, self-inject, at-home testosterone treatments, providing convenience and additional health monitoring measures for your safety, including a take-home blood pressure monitoring cuff. Self-inject at-home treatments are $130